Gentlemen, you're missing the point, both of you. The Iraqi government says they want a timetable for us to withdraw. I want to ask you, Pete, one more time, or several more times. Doesn't that clash with this administration's position, which we will not set a timetable?
This administration, I believe, all those that have served over there want to come home as soon as possible. And this is a positive development because the Iraqi government is saying we're much closer to taking over politically. When Jon says,
let me ask you, Pete, one more time. Do you personally support a timetable?
I believe it needs to be based on conditions on the ground, but I think it's a good thing that the Iraqi government...
Conditions on the ground is saying we play it as we see it when the time comes. That says we don't set a timetable. We don't agree to leave at any agreed time. Do you support us leaving at any agreed time along with the Iraqi government? Do you agree with the Iraqi government?
We need to work alongside the Iraqi government to ensure that we leave behind a stable state where Prime Minister Maliki can control, which is exactly what's happening.
Maliki says he wants us out now or to set a timetable. Do you agree with that?
Maliki wants us out as soon as possible. We want out as soon as possible.
That's not what he's saying. Okay, let's go.
That is what he's saying.
His own candidate, Senator
He's saying he wants a timetable. Do you want a timetable, yes or no?
Do I want a timetable?
Yes,
we want out as soon as possible.
By March of next year, March of 2 years from now, April of next year. That's called a timetable. Are we going to have a timetable or not for leaving Iraq? Or are we going to stay there indefinitely?
It's always been based on conditions on the ground. We're bringing troops home and violence is going down. We're bringing troops home, Chris, and violence is going down.
You're not here to deal with the facts.
That's a good thing.
Okay, look, I'm going to ask you, will you deal with the facts? The Iraqi government says they want us to leave on a timetable. Are you agreeable to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me ask you, how do we deal with that? If we disagree with them, it seems to me we're the occupier against their will.
Absolutely. They have a freely elected government that we establish. If they're asking us to leave, we need to leave. It is an international, independent country that says, hey, the American military, we don't want you here anymore. It's a government that we established, that we elected, and the military we trained.
Okay, here's what John McCain said back in 2004 to a meeting of the Council on Foreign Relations. Let's listen to the exchange. The group's chairman was Peter Peterson, who said, quote, what would or should we do if the post-June 30th period, and during that period, a so-called sovereign Iraqi government asks us to leave, even if we are unhappy about the security situation at that time? In other words, we don't like the conditions on the ground. I understand it's a hypothetical, but it's at least possible. Here's what McCain said when asked what we would do if the Iraqi government told us to leave with a timetable. Well, if that scenario evolves, then I think it's obvious that we would have to leave, because if it was an elected government of Iraq and we've been told to leave other places in the world, if it were an extremist government, then I think we would have to have other challenges. But I don't see how we could stay when our whole emphasis and policy has been based on turning the Iraqi government over to the Iraqi people. So John McCain says if they give us a timetable or tell us to leave at a specific time, we'll do it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, this is not an extremist government, so we're packing our bags and we're going home. That's exactly what's happening right now. We're bringing troops home right now, Chris, and violence is continuing to drop. It's at the lowest levels it's been since this war began, because the surge has created the conditions where Maliki is now strong enough to make these kind of political statements. These are complex, political
Why do you keep calling them
negotiations.
political statements? Why do you keep calling them political?
It's a negotiation.
What do you mean by a political statement?
Because right now the government of Iraq and the government of the United States are negotiating over a status of forces agreement, and this is all within that context.
Well, who are they
negotiating
with?
He's going to make these statements. They're negotiating with the State Department and the United States government.
How can we tell them after the end of this year that we're going to stay in their country if they don't want us there?
If they formally asked us to leave, I believe we would. They haven't done so.
It seemed pretty formal to me today, Pete.
No,
Come
this
on,
is
it seemed pretty formal today.
These are negotiations.
Absolutely
Chris,
not.
you know this
Absolutely
is not. They've not formally looked in the camera and said
The purpose of the American military is to protect our country, and the 5 surge brigades that went into Iraq last year should have gone to Afghanistan, and because of it, Afghanistan's falling apart right now. Now you have a country that doesn't even want us there, and you guys want to continue an occupation that destroys our military assets and takes us completely out of the fight against bin Laden. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Prime Minister Maliki also said yesterday that the terrorists in this country have been defeated, and they've been defeated because our surge brigades went out there and took the fight to Al-Qaeda and to Iranian-backed militias. And you say Al-Qaeda's not in Iraq.
The largest attack in Afghanistan happened yesterday. You have our NATO allies not meeting their missions in Afghanistan. Bin Laden's on the loose in Afghanistan.
Gentlemen, what I find interesting here is the news. You know, for months now, the debate in America is between those like John McCain who have talked about a long-term participation in that country, a long-term commitment of U.S. troops in that country, perhaps 100 years, staying in that country for many years, like in Korea. Now we find out that the Iraqi government does not want us there with permanent bases. They clearly don't want any American bases over there unless they're working under the leadership, in fact, the orders of Iraqi officials. And They want us to set a timetable for leaving or else leave immediately. That runs completely against the rhetoric we've been hearing from the administration, from John McCain, who have been saying they don't want to cut and run, they don't want to surrender, they want to stay there for 100 years. And now the Iraqi government itself comes out and says, we want you guys out of here now or under a timetable and no permanent basis. That completely undercuts the Republican administration's position and McCain's position.
Chris, is that not all good news?
I don't see how it doesn't.
Chris, is that all not good news?
No, doesn't it undercut their argument?
It actually reinforces the argument that if you surge, you can create the political space for Iraqis to stand up, which is exactly what is happening.
When we got guys dying in Iraq, you say we need to keep troops in Iraq.
Let's take a look now.
When we're winning, you say we got to have troops stay in Iraq.
Nobody died.
Both sides of the argument.
John, let's listen to what the president has said and Senator McCain has said. Let's look at the history here.
The party of FDR and the party of Harry Truman has become the party of cut and run. If we were to leave before the job is done, the enemy's coming after us.
President Bush has talked about our staying in Iraq for 50 years.
Maybe 100.
If we do what Senator Obama wants to do, and that's immediate withdrawal, that would mean surrender in Iraq.
Okay, that's what they've been saying, and now we're hearing from the Iraqi government. I think, Pete, you and I obviously disagree on this, something different. But here is the ad that your group has been putting out. Let's watch your group's position on this campaign issue.
Served in Iraq.
I fought in Afghanistan.
My son is fighting in Iraq.
We all fought.
We're still fighting.
We're still fighting, and today we're winning. Casualties are at an all-time low. Al-Qaeda in Iraq is decimated.
The Iraqi army controls most of the country.
These are the facts. They can't be ignored.
We changed strategy in Iraq, and the surge worked.
Now that's change we can believe in.
We need to finish the job.
We need to finish the job.
No matter who is president.
So over the next 4 years and 8 years, what does finishing the job mean, Pete, if the Iraqi government has basically called for a timetable for us to leave?
Chris, finishing
the job mean?
Is exactly what's happening right now. As
now,
we
what is it for the next to answer the question, Pete, over the next 4 to 8 years, what does finishing the job mean if the Iraqi government has told us they want a timetable for withdrawal?
Finishing the job means an Iraqi government that doesn't allow haven to our enemies in al-Qaeda and Iranian-backed militias, which is exactly what's happening. As our troops come home, violence is continuing to drop. This is good news.
Okay.
These are great things.
So it's good news that the Iraqi government is telling us to leave.
Absolutely. I mean, that's political progress. They haven't formally done so, Chris. This is part of a negotiation over a status of forces agreement. They have not formally said we want you to leave. They're communicating to their own people, to our people, trying to negotiate the best settlement they can for their long-term situation. Which is very good. We're battling it on the political spectrum.
Pete is saying that basically what they're saying is for home consumption. That's not really what they want us to do.
Absolutely it's for home consumption. Think about it. You have a democracy now in Iraq, and a majority of Iraqis don't want us there.
Yes, we do.
Okay? So Sadr doesn't want us there, and these are all part of Maliki's coalition. So Maliki cannot keep a popular public statement that he thinks we should have a long-term 100 years presence that John McCain wants in Iraq. It's very similar to the problem our NATO allies are having in Afghanistan.
Let me tell you, having lived and watched through the Vietnam War, I never heard the Vietnamese government tell us to leave. This is a staggering development.
It's
for the
a great
Iraqi government that we've been giving our blood is telling us it's time for us to go. That runs, to me, directly counter to John McCain talking about a Korean-style situation we're there for 100 years.
It's exactly because of folks like Senator McCain who stood up and called for a surge and had the judgment to do so. How can we be there 100 years if they tell us to leave? He called for a change in war. The attacks are down over 90% in the last year.
John McCain talks about a 100-year occupation. How can we stay there if they tell us to leave?
How can we stay if they tell us to leave?
If they tell us to leave.
We won't stay if they tell us to leave. They haven't formally done so. They're negotiating, Chris.
Okay, thanks very much. Keep Pete Hegseth and Jon Soltz coming up.